हेलो एवरीवन, वेलकम टू माय चैनल एनसीईआरटी अध्याय। कैसा है आप सब? पढ़ाई वढ़ाई कैसी चल रही है? आई होप आप सबकी पढ़ाई बढ़िया चल रही होगी और आप एनसीईआरटी पे बहुत 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 ज़्यादा फोकस कर रहे होंगे। टुडे वी विल स्टडी बायोडाइवर्सिटी एंड कंजर्वेशन, चैप्टर नंबर 15. If an alien from a distant galaxy were to visit our planet Earth, the first thing that would amaze and baffle him would most probably be the enormous diversity of life that he would encounter. Even for humans, the rich variety of living organisms with which they share this planet never ceases to astonish and fascinate us. The common man would find it hard to believe that there are more than 20,000 species of ants, 3 lakh species of beetles, 28,000 species of fishes, and nearly 20,000 species of orchids. Ecologists and evolutionary biologists have been trying to understand the significance of such biodiversity by asking important questions. Why are these so many species? Did such great diversity exist throughout Earth's history? How did this diversification come about? How and why is this diversity important to the biosphere? Would it function any differently if the diversity was much less? How do humans benefit from the diversity of life? Biodiversity. In our biosphere, immense diversity or heterogeneity exists not only at the species level but all the levels of biological organization, ranging from macromolecule within cell to biomes. Biodiversity is the term popularized by the sociobiologist एडवर्ड विल्सन. तो बायोडाइवर्सिटी जो टर्म है वो किसने दिया था? एडवर्ड विल्सन ने. और कितनी कौन कौन सी स्पीशीज कितनी है ये बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है, इस पर क्वेश्चन आता है तो ये हम लोग को याद ही रखनी है. जैसे कि 20,000 एंट्स की स्पीशीज है, 3 लाख स्पीशीज है बीटल्स की, 28,000 फिशेस की और नियरली 20,000 स्पीशीज है ऑर्किड्स की. तो 20 किसकी हो गई? एंट और ऑर्किड की 20 हो गई. 3 लाख सबसे ज्यादा किसकी है? बीटल्स की है. और उससे फिर उसके बाद फिर फिशेस की और सबसे कम ऑर्किड्स और एंट्स की. ठीक है. और बायोडाइवर्सिटी पॉपुलराइज किसने किया था? एडवर्ड विल्सन. एडवर्ड विल्सन कौन थे? सोशियो बायोलॉजिस्ट. टू डिस्क्राइब द कंबाइंड डाइवर्सिटी एट ऑल द लेवल्स ऑफ बायोलॉजिकल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन. द मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट ऑफ देम आर: first, genetic diversity. A single species might show high diversity at the genetic level over its distributional range. The genetic variation shown by the medicinal plant Rauwolfia vomitoria growing in different Himalayan ranges must be in terms of the potency and concentration of the active chemical rhizopene that the plant produces. India has more than 50,000 genetically different strains of rice and 1,000 variety of mango. तो मैंगो कितनी वैरायटी है? 1000. और डिफरेंट स्ट्रेन्स ऑफ राइस यानी कितने? 50,000 राइस के स्ट्रेन्स हैं. तो ये बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है. इस पे भी जितने भी ये नंबर बेस्ड क्वेश्चन है कि क्वांटिटी बेस्ड कितने कौन से स्पीशीज थे, ये इंपॉर्टेंट है, इस पे क्वेश्चंस आते हैं. स्पीशीज डाइवर्सिटी. द डाइवर्सिटी एट द स्पीशीज लेवल. फॉर एग्जांपल, द वेस्टर्न घाट्स have a greater amphibian species diversity than the eastern ghats. Ecological diversity at the ecosystem level. India, for instance, with its desert, rainforest, mangrove, coral reef, wetland, estuaries, and alpine meadows, has a greater ecosystem diversity than a Scandinavian country like Norway. It has taken millions of years of evolution to accumulate this rich diversity in nature, but we could lose all the wealth in less than 2 centuries if the present rate of species loses continue. अगर मतलब जैसे अभी स्पीशीज धीमे धीमे कम हो रही है, अगर वैसे ही चलता रहा तो बहुत ही जल्दी स्पीशीज जैसे क्या होंगी? सेंचुरीज तक बचेंगी ही नहीं. Biodiversity and its conservation are now vital environmental issues of international concern as more and more people around the world begin to realize the critical importance of biodiversity for our survival and well-being on this planet. How many species are there on Earth and how many in India? Since there are published record of all the species discovered and named, we know that many species in all have been recorded so far. But it is not easy to answer the question of how many species there are on Earth. According to IUCN 2004, the total number of plant and animal species described so far is slightly more than 1.5 million, but we have no clear idea of how many species are yet to be discovered and described. Estimates vary widely, and many of them are only educated guesses. For many taxonomic groups, species inventories and more complete in temperate than in tropical countries. Considering that an overwhelming large proportion of the species waiting to be discovered are in the tropics, biologists make a statistical comparison of the temperate tropical species richness of an exhaustively studied group of insects and extrapolate this ratio to other groups of animals and plants to come up with a gross estimate of the total number of species on Earth. Some extreme estimates range from 20 to 50 million, but a more conservative and scientifically sound estimate made by the Robert May places the global species diversity at about 7 million. Let us look at some interesting aspects about Earth's biodiversity based on the currently available species inventories. More than 70% of all the species recorded are animals, while plants, including algae, fungi, bryophyte, gymno, angio, comprise no more than 22% of the total. तो 70% इन्होंने बताया एनिमल है, और वाइल प्लांट जैसे कि आगे कंप्राइज नो मोर देन 22% ऑफ द टोटल का 22% से ज़्यादा नहीं है. अमंग एनिमल्स, इंसेक्ट्स आर द मोस्ट स्पीशीज rich taxonomic group making up more than 70% of the total. That means out of every 10 animals on this planet, 7 are insects. यानी सबसे ज़्यादा जो एनिमल्स में भी क्या है, इंसेक्ट सबसे ज़्यादा है. अगेन, how do we explain the enormous diversification of insects? The number of fungi species in the world is more than the combined total of species of fishes, amphibians, reptiles, and mammals. In figure 15.1, diversity is depicted showing species number of major taxa. तो जो फिगर 15.1 है ये बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है. इनवर्टिब्रेट्स, वर्टिब्रेट्स, प्लांट्स, जितना भी इन्होंने बताया है ये सब तीनों बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है. इनवर्टिब्रेट्स में जैसे अदर एनिमल ग्रुप्स हैं उनका कितना है, और फिर इंसेक्ट सबसे ज़्यादा इंसेक्ट्स हैं, फिर अदर एनिमल ग्रुप मोलस्क, क्रस्टेशियन, ऐसे फिशेस, एम्फीबियंस, रेप्टाइल, बर्ड्स, मैमल्स, कैसे किस चीज़ में किसको डिस्ट्रीब्यूट किया गया है ये आता है एग्जाम में. क्वेश्चंस इन तीनों पे बहुत ज़्यादा क्वेश्चंस आते हैं. इट शुड बी नोटेड दैट दीज एस्टिमेट्स डू नॉट गिव एनी फिगर फॉर प्रोकैरियोट. Biologists are not sure about how many prokaryotic species there might be. The problem is that conventional taxonomic methods are not suitable for identifying microbial species, and many species are simply not culturable under laboratory conditions. If we accept biochemical or molecular criteria for delineating species or for this group, then their diversity alone might run into millions. Although India has only 2.4% of the world's land area, its share of the global species diversity is an impressive 8.1%. That is what makes our country one of the 12 mega diversity countries of the world. Nearly 45,000 species of plant and twice as many of animals have been recorded from India. How many living species are actually there waiting to be discovered and named? If we accept May's global estimate, only 22% of the total species have been recorded so far. Applying the proportion to India's diversity figures, we estimate that there are probably more than 1 lakh plant species and more than 3 lakh animal species yet to be discovered and described. तो 1 lakh plant की species और 3 lakh animal species अभी भी describe करना बाकी है. Would we ever be able to complete the inventory of the biological wealth of a country? Consider the immense trained manpower and the time required to complete the job. The situation appears more hopeless when we realize that a large fraction of these species faces the threat of becoming extinct even before we discover them. Nature's biological library is running even before we catalog the titles of all the books stocked there. Pattern of biodiversity latitudinal gradients. The diversity of plant and animal is not uniform throughout the world. Diversity uniform नहीं है but shows a rather uneven distribution. For many group of animal or plant, there are interesting patterns in diversity. The most well known being the latitudinal gradient in diversity. In general, species diversity decreases as we move away from the equator towards the poles. With very few exceptions, tropics, latitudinal range of 23.5 degree north to 23.5 degree south, harbor more species than temperate or polar areas. Colombia, located near the equator, has nearly 1,400 species of birds, while New York at 41 degree north has 105 species, and Greenland at 71 degree north only 56 species. India, with much of its land area in the tropical latitude, has more than 1,200 species of birds. A forest in a tropical region like Ecuador has up to 10 times as many species of vascular plant as a forest of equal area in a temperate region like the Midwest of the USA. The largely tropical Amazonian rainforest in South America has the greatest biodiversity on earth. It is home to more than 40,000 species of plant, 3,000 species of fishes, 1,300 of birds, 427 of mammals, 427 of amphibians, 378 of reptiles, and of more than 1,25,000 invertebrates. Scientists estimate that in these rainforests there might be at least 2 million insect species awaiting to be discovered and named. What is so special about tropics that might account for their greater biological diversity? Ecologists and evolutionary biologists have proposed various hypotheses. Some important ones are speciation is generally a function of time, unlike temperate regions subjected to frequent glaciations. In the past, tropical latitude have remained relatively undistributed for millions of years and thus had a long evolutionary time for species diversification. Tropical environment, unlike temperate ones, are less seasonal and relatively more constant and predictable. Such constant environment promote niche specialization and lead to a greater species diversity. There is more solar energy available in the tropics, which contribute to high productivity. This, in turn, might contribute indirectly to greater diversity. Third, species area relationship. During his pioneering and extensive exploration in the wilderness of South American jungles, the great German naturalist and geographer Alexander von Humboldt observed that within a region, species richness increased with increasing explored area, but only up to a limit. In fact, the relation between species richness and area for a wide variety of taxa, angiosperm plants, birds, bats, freshwater fishes, turns out to be a rectangular hyperbola on a logarithmic scale. The relationship is a straight line described by the equation log S is equals to log C plus Z log A, where S is the species richness, A is the area, Z is the slope of the line, that is regression coefficient, and C is equals to y-intercept. Ecologists have discovered that the value of z lies in the range of zero point 0.1 to zero point 0.2 regardless of the taxonomic group or the region, whether it is the plant in Britain, birds in California, or mollusk in New York State. The slopes of the regression line are amazingly similar. But if you analyze the species area relationship among very large areas like the entire continent, you will find that the slope of the line to be much steeper, z value in the range of zero point 0.6 to 1.2. For example, for frugivorous fruit-eating birds and mammals in the tropical forest of different continents, द स्लोप इज फाउंड टू बी 1.15। तो जितनी भी स्लोप्स हैं ये इंपॉर्टेंट है। ये ग्राफ बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है, जो फिगर दिया गया है 15.2, इस पे क्वेश्चन आते हैं, स्लोप पे क्वेश्चन आते हैं। Next, the importance of species diversity of the ecosystem. Does the number of species in a community really matter to the functioning of the ecosystem? This is a question for which ecologists have not been able to give a definitive answer. For many decades, ecologists believe that communities with more species generally tend to be more stable than those with less species. जहाँ species ज़्यादा होंगी वो ज़्यादा stable होंगे। What exactly is stability for a biological community? A stable community should not show too much variation in productivity from year to year. It must be either resistant or resilient to occasional disturbances, natural or man-made, and it must also be resistant to invasions by alien species. We don't know how these attributes are linked to species richness in a community, but David Tillman long-term ecosystem experiment using outdoor plot provides some tentative answer. Tillman found that plots with more species showed less year-to-year variation in total biomass. He also showed that in his experiment increased diversity contributed to higher productivity. Although we may not understand completely how species richness contributes to the well-being of an ecosystem, we know enough to realize that rich biodiversity is not only essential for ecosystem health but but permittive but imperative for the very survival of the human race on this planet. At a time when we are losing species at an alarming pace, one might ask, does it really matter to us if a few species become extinct? Would Western Ghats ecosystem be less functional if one of its tree frog species is lost forever? How is our quality of life affected if, say, instead of 20,000 we have only 15,000 species of ants on Earth? There are no direct answers to such naive questions, but we can develop a proper perspective through an analogy, the river popper hypothesis, used by Stanford ecologist Paul Ehrlich. In an airplane ecosystem, all parts are joined together using thousands of rivets, that is species. If every passenger traveling in it starts popping a rivet to take home, causing a species to become extinct, it may not affect flight safety, proper functioning of the ecosystem initially, but as more rivets are removed, the plane becomes dangerously weak over a period of time. Furthermore, which rivet is removed may also be critical. Loss of rivet on the wings, key species that drive major ecosystem function, is obviously a more serious threat to flight safety than loss of few rivets on the seats or windows inside the plane. तो रिवेट पॉपर हाइपोथेसिस बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है। किसने दी थी? स्टैनफोर्ड इकोलॉजिस्ट थे। क्या थे ये भी बताना बहुत ज़रूरी है। तो ये बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है और इस पे क्वेश्चंस आते हैं। Loss of biodiversity. While it is doubtful if any new species are being added through speciation into the Earth's treasury of species, there is no doubt about their continuing losses. The biological wealth of our planet has been declining rapidly, and the accusing finger is clearly pointing to human activities. The colonization of tropical Pacific island by humans is said to have led to the extinction of more than 2,000 species of native birds. The IUCN Red List 2004 documents the extinction of 784 species, including 338 vertebrate, 359 invertebrate, and 87 plants, in the last 500 years. Some examples of recent extinctions include the dodo, Mauritius, quagga Africa, thylacine Australia, stellarcica Russia, and three subspecies, Bali javan, Caspian of tiger. The last 20 years alone have witnessed the disappearance of 27 species. Careful analysis of shows that extinction across taxa are not random. Some groups like amphibians appear to be more vulnerable to extinction. Adding to the grim scenario of extinction is the fact that more than 15,500 species worldwide are facing the threat of extinction. Presently, 12% of all bird species, 23% of mammalian species, 32% of all amphibian species, and 31% of all gymnosperm species in the world face the threat of extinction. From a study of the history of life on Earth through fossil records, we learned that large-scale loss of species like the one we are currently witnessing have also happened earlier, even before humans appeared on the scene. During the long period greater than 3 billion years since the origin and diversification of life on Earth, there were 5 episodes of mass extinction of a species. How is the sixth extinction presently in progress different from the previous episodes? The difference is in the rates. The current species extinction rates are estimated to be 100 to 1000 times faster than in the pre-human time, and our activities are responsible for the faster rate. Ecologists warn that if the present trend continue, nearly half of all the species on Earth might be wiped out within the next 100 years. In general, loss of biodiversity in a region may lead to first, decline in plant production, second, lowered resistance to environmental perturbations such as drought, and third, increased variability in certain ecosystem processes such as plant productivity, water use, pest and disease cycle. Cause of biodiversity losses: the accelerated rate of species extinction that the world is facing now are largely due to human activities. There are four major causes. The evil quadrant, most important, फेवरेट टॉपिक मतलब इसमें से क्वेश्चन आता ही आता है evil quadrant के ऊपर is the sobriquet used to describe them. First, habitat loss and fragmentation, overexploitation, alien species invasion, and co-extinctions. These are the four uh, major causes. This is the first, habitat loss and fragmentation. This is the most important cause driving animals and plants to extinction. The most dramatic example of habitat loss, come from tropical rainforest, once covering more than 14% of the Earth's land surface. These rainforests now cover no more than 6%. They are being destroyed fast. By the time you finish reading this chapter, 1,000 more hectares of rainforest would have been lost. The Amazon rainforest, it is so huge that it is called the lung of the planet. Harboring probably millions of species is being cut and cleared for cultivating soybeans or for conversion of grassland for raising beef cattle. Beside total loss, the degradation of many habitats by pollution also threatens the survival of many species. When large habitats are broken up into smaller fragments due to various human activities, mammals and birds requiring large territories and certain animals with migratory habits are badly affected, leading to population declines. Second, overexploitation. Human beings have always depended on nature for food and shelter, as we all know. And but when need turns to greed, it leads to overexploitation of natural resources. Many species extinctions in the last 500 years, stellar sea cow, कहाँ की थी रशिया की passengers pigeon, were due to overexploitation by humans. Presently, many marine fish populations around the world are over-harvested, endangering the continued existence of some commercially important species. Third, alien species invasion. When alien species are introduced unintentionally or deliberately for whatever purpose, some of them turn invasive and cause decline or extinction of indigenous species. The Nile perch introduced into the Lake Victoria in East Africa led eventually to the extinction of an ecologically unique assemblage of more than 200 species of cichlid fish in the lake. You must be familiar with the environmental damage caused and threat posed to our native species by invasive weed species like carrot grass, parthenium, lantana and water hyacinth, iconia. The recent illegal introduction of the African catfish Clarias garipinus for aquaculture purpose is posing a threat to the indigenous catfishes in our rivers. Coextinction. When the species become extinct, the plant and animal species associated with it in an obligatory way also become extinct. When a host fish species become extinct, its unique assemblage of parasites also meets the same fate. Another example is the case of co-evolved plant-pollinator mutualism, where extinction of one invariably leads to the extinction of other. तो आज यहीं तक रखते हैं. बायोडाइवर्सिटी कंजर्वेशन हम लोग कल से स्टार्ट करेंगे, क्योंकि फिर आप लोगों को बोरिंग ना लगे. ये चैप्टर वैसे बहुत ज़रा सा बचा है, तो इसे कल हम लोग नेक्स्ट वीडियो में कंटिन्यू करते हैं. ओके. और समरी भी कवर करनी होगी हम लोगों को. तो तब तक अच्छे से पढ़ाई करिए, पढ़ती रहिए. दिस इज़ ऑल फॉर टुडे. एंड अगर आपको अच्छा लगा हो हमारे साथ पढ़ना एनसीईआरटी, तो प्लीज़ हमारे चैनल को लाइक करिए, शेयर करिए, सब्सक्राइब करिए. जितना ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा हो सके शेयर करिए अपने फ्रेंड्स को, जितने भी आपके दोस्त हैं जो प्रिपरेशन कर रहे हैं नीट की. ओके.